Hi everyone, this is Paisley here.
And this is Dr. Crow.
And today we are reviewing one of the new Civ 7 civs that has never been seen before, and it's the Abbasids.
Now, we took a poll whether we should be positive or be negative about this civ, and the results were 50-50 split.
Yes. So in this video, we're going to start off by going over some of the names that they've picked for the abilities related to this civ, and then we're going to go into some of the visual aspects that have been revealed so far and maybe focus a little bit on the architecture of the Abbasids. And of course, our goal here isn't to be didactic and sort of say we have some authority. Instead, we really want to open up a conversation. If you know stuff that we don't mention, we would love to hear from you in the comments, as well as if you're unfamiliar with, Islamic history, we hope this is an opportunity to sort of be introduced to the topic.
So let's start with the game guide. Here we have a listing of a few abilities as well as the unique features of the civ. And let's start with the first unique ability.
Right, so the first thing they list is Medina. I don't really understand what the mechanics is because we haven't really played. The word Medina you may be familiar with as the second most important city in Islam. So obviously first is Mecca, where the Kaaba is, but Medina is where the Prophet goes during his exile, and it's where the house of the Prophet is, which is what we also call the first mosque.
And it's where the first kind of contours of what a Muslim community would look like were defined.
But this Medina, I don't think is referring to the city of Medina. It's referring to the Arabic word Medina, which means, I guess it means city, but it also has an implication of a fortified city. Am I right?
Yes, so the first cities that were founded by the Islamic empires, like the first Islamic caliphates, were sort of more like fortified compounds. So these were cities like Kufa, Basra, Fustat, and they were kind of square-shaped half barracks, half cities. But Medina is used for both that and generic cities.
And this gets into our first maybe critique of this civilization pack, is that the terminology used isn't really specific to the Abbasids. And this is one reason why I was really excited to see civilizations into the ages they belong to, is that it meant we would hopefully see more particular kits and architecture to that empire or civilization or whatever you call it. So for example, in Civ 6, we have Arabia. They're supposed to stand in for Arabs of all time, of all place.
Right.
So, they mix and match from different places like the Mamluk, Salahadin, but they're called Arabia.
Right.
It doesn't quite make sense as a unique period in time. It's more of an amalgamation. But here we were really hoping to see something more historically grounded in the Abbasid Empire. And I don't think Medina is that. So let's go into the civics tree. The first one is Round City, which I think actually this is one of the better names for this civ pack because Baghdad is known as the round city. And boy, look at this image. It is very much a round city.
This I like a lot. It refers to Baghdad, which is the Abbasid capital for most of its history. Towards the end of the effective rule of the Abbasids, Baghdad will be sort of the last remaining center of Abbasid rule. Because of that association between the city and the caliphate is very strong. The emphasis on the roundness is actually quite important. Because as I mentioned, the early, for example, in the Umayyad period, these early cities are more square-shaped. Their idea is that it's coming from an army base, like a barracks. But the cities of the Persian Empire, the Sassanids, were usually round, right? This ideal form of the round city. So when Baghdad is built in a round shape, it's saying, oh, we're actually looking back to Persian history for our aesthetics, for our, ideological sources.
We sometimes think about these succeeding caliphate empires as layering on top of one another, but here we actually see a break from the Umayyads, and of course this is because there was a revolt. It was a very intentional break from the Umayyads, and we'll get into the architecture of it a little bit, but that does relate to this term mawla.
Yes, so mawla refers to the system of clientage or patronage, which kind of comes out of a contradiction in early Islam, which is that in Arabic, especially pre-Islamic Arabic culture, kinship ties, clan ties are very, very important. They're crucial, but Islam is a universal religion. So what do you do with all these people who are converts but aren't in an Arabic clan? Mawla became a system where people would be attached as clients to a clan. The issue was that, of course, there's a contradiction because Islam says all believers are equal, right? But in the system, clearly there's an inequality between people who are originally part of these clans and people who are just clients.
So the Turks, for example, the Persians.
Part of the Abbasid revolution in 750 movie was about Persian mawali wanting to revolt against this system and kind of have a more equal share in governmental practice. It doesn't disappear. The system remains, but the kind of centrality of it in the Umayyad period is much less evident in the Abbasid period because the Abbasid base of power is in Mesopotamia and Persia, where there's a lot of converts, right?
So, when we first saw the word mawla, we thought, well, this doesn't quite apply to the Abbasids, but maybe it's referring to this transition and how important the mawla system was to the establishment of the Abbasids, even if it no longer exists as a central rule. And now the third term is al-Jabr. You will recognize this word from
Yes.
algebra.
From algebra, so where we get the word algebra from. Again, I think it's designed to reflect this evolution of mathematics during the Abbasid period, trying to relate this notion of how foundational the Abbasid period is to modern mathematics.
Let's move on to the unique infrastructure. And I think maybe here is where a lot of the confusion came from, because why is a unique quarter named ulema? Ulema means scholars. It's the plural of alim. It's not a spatial term. You can't even say ulema quarter because that doesn't really exist either.
It's a profession. It doesn't really make sense. It's like saying lawyers as a quarter. Like, it doesn't really make sense.
Just
right?
say the word court.
Court, or like teachers. Well, no, like school, right? That's the bill. That's the space, right?
Yeah.
It really doesn't make sense. I hope they change it, to be honest.
There was some confusion because when it first came out, there was a typo. They said when you build in the medinat quarter.
Which is just another way of saying Medina in different contexts, grammatical contexts. It's like connected to a proper noun or an adjective.
So anyways, the word ulema refers to the unique quarter. Now, the architecture of the madrasa, I think, is spot on. This is one of the positives I have to say about the look of this CIV. We're only seeing snippets, but I believe it is a 4E1 plan. So E1 means sort of vaulted portal. The Samanids, the Seljuks carry on this tradition, but it probably comes from Persia. We have Ctesiphon as an example of one large E1, and the 4E1 or 3E1 plan sort of refers to the entrances to the courtyard. And we do have examples of madrasas from Abbasid era, although it's much later, that are in this plan, but really this architectural plan belongs to this region. And I think for the Abbasids, they're really modeling their architecture on the region they're in, and less so the Umayyad examples.
Right, for sure. When you think of Umayyad architecture, we often think of things that are kind of derived almost from Byzantine architecture, like
Definitely.
mosaics, kind of more basilica layouts.
Yes, so for example, the Great Mosque of Damascus is on a basilica.
And it looks like a church, right?
Definitely. So you still have a lot of the architectural style and plan of the church present in the mosque today. The mosaics are beautiful. And the same mosaics you can kind of see in the Dome of the Rock, especially in the interior. So this is one of my problems with the mosque architecture, which we believe is the building right across the madrasa. It is a single dome, central mosque plan. Now, the central mosque plan is not popular at all during this time or in this region. It definitely looks like the Dome of the Rock to me. We do have domes from the Abbasid period, but I really think this central large dome plan is out of place for the Abbasids.
We have examples of Abbasid mosques at Samarra, right, which are in ruins today, but you can clearly see that the plan is of a rectangular mosque with a columned layout inside. So it's not like a circle, it's not a dome. That's kind of more standard for Abbasid mosques.
Right. When you think of Abbasid Mosque, you think of the minarets of Samarra. And that would have been such a beautiful, interesting inclusion in this game that really challenges people's preconceived notions of what is Islamic architecture. So yeah, I think this was really a missed opportunity to introduce people who are not specialists in Islamic architecture to this very unique, interesting, but also representative style of the, swirly minarets that we see in Samarra, but we also see repeated in Cairo when it was a client state of the Abbasids. Now, the single domed structure does appear in some tombs. So let's go to the possible Alim units.
Here we have a list of important figures, but it's important to note during this period you have the translation of Greek texts, and from that you have this emergence of a field called philosophy or falsafa. But these are terms that have important discursive meanings at the time, right? So refers very specifically to this tradition of looking towards Plato, Aristotle, and trying to create a rational basis for belief. But then you have scholars who are scholars of hadith, scholars of the traditions of the Prophet, or lexicographers. So they're about trying to look at the Arabic roots of things and determine meaning from those rather than looking at the Greek tradition. They are in collaboration at times, but they're also in conflict at times. So for example, like Ibn Sina would be a very famous example of someone who is from this tradition of falsafa. He's trying to harmonize the Greek tradition, the philosophical tradition, with hadith scholarship, the Arabic scholarship. But, he's in a very famous dispute with people like al-Ghazali who are coming at it from a very different sort of perspective, which is anti-philosophical, but doesn't mean anti-scientific necessarily or anti-knowledge.
And this Abbasid state does end up picking a side.
It does. So there's a very famous period called the Mihna. They're going against scholars who are opposed to philosophy.
Well, now I'm wondering, these are all great choices, but is there any adim you would add instead or in addition to these?
Well, I think one I could add would be Ibn Hanbal, right? Is a very important figure for the Mihna period because he's one of the jurists who resists the persecution, and he founds the Hanbali school of law.
Let's just pick a few of our favorites, and I think for me, Rabia of Basra stands out as a woman. Can you tell us more about this poet?
Right, well, she is a Sufi, one of the first Sufi mystics, and there's all sorts of stories about her wandering through the streets of Basra with a lamp, trying to find like an honest person, like these kind of motifs of person who is also like a critic of society in that way, right? They're kind of acting in the way that the Greek philosophers did, right? Which was that they are there to both provoke people in a sense, but also to teach people in that way.
Okay, so let's move on to the unique military unit, which I don't think we have a lot to say. It's a Mamluk. The Mamluk state, for those of you who are unaware, it comes out of these slave soldiers revolting and taking over Cairo, but they are originally soldiers that are enslaved from Turkic regions.
Right, and this is the period where you have the Turkic migrations from Central Asia. There's a kind of practice that develops of conscripting or buying enslaved Turks or Central Asians and employing them as military. Throughout Islamic history, these groups of slave soldiers will very often take control of the state themselves.
And then their wonder is the House of Wisdom. We don't know architecturally what it looked like at all.
No.
We don't even know if it's a real place.
Right, yeah, because like house can generically mean like a group of people, like al-Bayt just means like the house of the Prophet, but it refers to the Prophet's family, right? So here it may refer generically to the grouping of people of wisdom, right, in Baghdad, rather than a specific building or neighborhood, but we got to represent it.
The square-based dome, which I think is a lot better than the round-based dome.
For sure.
The square-based dome, it reminds me a lot of Samanid architecture, again, tomb architecture specifically. You can see for yourself if it also reminds you of that, or if you know of something else it could be referring to. Okay, so that is our review of the Abbasids. I hope we sort of balanced 50-50 positive and negative, although I think the final vote was 52% positive.
Okay, well, I think our video is 52% positive.
Yeah, let's make the like count 52% likes. No, please don't do that. But please do leave comments and subscribe so other people can find our videos and join the conversation. Thank you all for watching. See you next time.
See you.